And we're live here for a very special episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management, a rather international edition this week. I'm your co-host, Steve Thomas. Also here is my co-host, Danny Guillory, as always, and we have some special guests with us today. We have from the Endpoint Manager product team, we have Anton Warshawski, and we have Venkata Papana. I got that right, I think. And then finally, our very special guest of the hour is Mr. Pat Fetty. He is from the Endpoint Manager customer experience team, and we are here to talk about endpoint management and government and sovereign clouds. So a quick round of introductions. We'll start with you, Danny.
Hey, everybody. What's up? Name's Danny. Good to be here.
And Venkata.
Hey, I'm Venkata. I'm an engineer on MEM team. It's great to be here.
And Anton.
Hi, I'm Anton. I'm an engineer on MEM team. Looking forward to hearing your questions.
And finally, the person of the hour, Mr. Pat Fetty.
Hi, I'm Pat. I'm a Taurus. I'm part of the MEM CAT team, Customer Acceleration team, and happy to be here today.
Awesome. So, Pat, I know we use the term GovClouds in the title of this episode, and I'm thinking we probably should have used the term sovereign clouds because we've kind of pivoted to this terminology. Why is that?
Some people have pivoted to the terminology. The problem is, as you well know, is trying to kind of get everybody to use the same lingo, right? Microsoft sort of has its own language, and each little product group sort of has their own lingo and their own acronyms and all that. And so really the term sovereign cloud is the correct one. Now, when you kind of look at what we have in terms of sovereign offerings, well, there's really only two, right? We have our US Gov Cloud, which is obviously based here in the States. And then we have a sovereign cloud in China. And so the China cloud is primarily there for multinational companies that have people that are boots on the ground in the country and want access to data locally. So you're not going over half the planet, right, to get your SharePoint docs and things like that. And that's a much, much, much smaller version of one of our sovereign clouds. In fact, you can count the number of devices in that cloud, in the thousands. Whereas in our Gov Cloud, which has been open a little over 4 years now, there's a little over 1 million devices in there. It's populated by all the DoD entities, a lot of the bigger government agencies. So they're both truly sovereign clouds, but the one that gets the attention, the one that has the most tenants and so forth, is the Gov Cloud. So that's why we kind of lean towards Gov Cloud instead of sovereign cloud, just because from a feature capability standpoint, they're exactly the same, but one is much more bigger and much, let's just say, more important than the other.
Understood. So I imagine that a lot of the folks that are listening to the live stream or they'll listen to the recording are probably from the U.S. What are the different clouds available for our U.S. public sector customers?
Yeah, great question, and not an easy one to answer. Again, the offerings across services aren't necessarily consistent. And so what I mean by that is if you look at Azure, Office, Intune, the number of clouds is certainly different. So Intune, like I said, sovereign clouds, we got US Gov Cloud and we have the China Cloud. And then within the US Gov Cloud, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, there's sort of two containers, if you will. But the instance of the Intune service is shared across those. Whereas if you look at Office, right, and Office in the Gov Cloud has actually two separate instances. And so, one is for what they call IL4 and one is for what they call IL5. Same thing with Azure, right? So if you kind of look at a diagram of this, right, you have Azure and Office in IL4, Azure and Office in IL5, and then Intune just kind of spans across the bottom there. So, and I don't want to get into the terminology because it'll just confuse everybody even more, but the Office teams and Azure teams purposely created two different instances within the Gov Cloud. My understanding of this, and this is kind of secondhand information when I first started doing this, was since Office and Azure will tend to deal with more personal information things like documents and so forth. They decided that they wanted to have sort of isolated clouds in both the IL4 and IL5 environments. And so that's why when you talk about the number of clouds, Office has X number. I don't know what that number is because they've got them scattered about Europe and others. And then Azure has the same thing, right? Where they have several of them. But for Intune, it's really just the two today. There's China and the U.S. cloud. Now, I will also say too, and I just had a conversation about this earlier in the week, there was a time that we had a cloud, we being Intune, in Germany, which was codenamed Black Forest, and so that was there primarily for German customers to make sure that all of their data stayed within the country's borders. What happened? So and this was built years ago. 4 or 5 years ago. What happened was that the EU passed their new sets of laws, their new privacy laws and so forth. The acronym is escaping me for whatever reason. And basically all of those new privacy laws did not map to anything that we had built in that Black Forest cloud. And so the decision was made to okay, let's just cut our losses. We're not going to completely re-architect this cloud just for one country. And so that's kind of being sunsetted as we speak here. So that does leave Intune with the US Gov cloud and then the China cloud as well.
So are government customers required to use these special types of tenants in all situations or just part of the time?
Yeah, another great question. The one thing that's consistent about government customers is that there's no consistency. And I mean, that's your tax dollars at work, kids.
I don't believe you. I really don't.
Danny knows all too well. So, the short answer is it just depends. Where there is some consistency is across the Department of Defense. They obviously have much stricter standards in terms of just general security and so forth. And so when we talk about IL4 and IL5, IL5 being the sort of more restrictive and more secure cloud, we also call that DoD cloud as just kind of another bit of nomenclature. So primarily all of the DoD entities live in that cloud. That IL5 instance is only available if you're a DoD entity. And you have to prove that, and I can kind of walk through that process if you want. But then the other in IL4, it's really all over the board in terms of who needs to be there versus who wants to be there in some cases. But what's interesting about these two is that for both IL4 and IL5, you kind of have to prove who you are. There are different SKUs for these clouds as well. And so IL4 has a SKU, IL5 has a SKU. And so before you can even purchase the licenses, you have to prove that I am the FBI or I am the US Navy. And there's a whole 10-step process that you go through to do that. And we have a team that's dedicated at Microsoft to actually kind of tracking that down and following that up. So, okay, is this really the U.S. Navy that's talking to us, or is this really the FBI? And so it's on the civilian side of it, it's just some folks are in that IL4 cloud and some folks are not. There's really no consistent thread as to why. Those SKUs are more expensive, I will tell you, than the commercial SKUs. This is a separate cloud that is separately managed and so forth. So they're getting additional, benefits and security from that. Plus, they're completely in control of their data. Microsoft has no access to these clouds whatsoever. The actual server rack rooms are guarded with, guys with machine guns, and it's managed by a third-party company, et cetera. And so, do they have to be in these clouds? It is completely up to that individual business. Whether or not they feel that they have to be in that cloud. I will add to that too, there's a third bucket, a big bucket here that I call system integrators. So the General Dynamics and Northrop Grumman's of the world, the folks that build fighter planes and do all that cool stuff, they obviously work very closely with these government entities. And they typically have much more stringent security requirements on them than the actual entity that they're working with. And it's because they're kind of outside the government bubble sort of thing. And so many of the SIs, almost all of the SIs exist in that Gov cloud. particularly just so that they can prove that, okay, look, we're in the more secure environment per your requirements. They don't want to be sort of left out of the loop, if you will. So the SIs, it's pretty consistent across all the SIs that they are definitely in that Gov cloud.
Is that the same for our commercial partners who are like hardware and software vendors who also work as government contractors, like the company that builds planes for commercial airlines and the company that builds planes for the Air Force? Where do they fit in?
Yeah, they're kind of in that system integrator bucket, but they're not typically a system integrator, right? The company you're talking about that builds airplanes, right? They have a section of their business that works specifically in the federal space. And so, if they want to, basically get these contracts and so forth, they're going to have to meet the requirement of having their tenant, their data, their devices in that government cloud. And there's a handful of examples like that are kind of sprinkled around. Even like a big multinational, and I'll stop naming names here. It's probably not what I'm supposed to be doing. But big multinationals, big security companies, consulting companies, et cetera, right? They have a piece of their business that's in the federal space. And so, yeah, they'll have tenants in there as well. The tricky part about that too, like if you're a multinational, is that these clouds, the commercial side and the government side, they're isolated from one another, right? You can't migrate devices and data. If you want to talk to the devices that are in that other cloud, you got to enroll into that cloud. And so it is completely isolated. And so that federal business, the people, for these companies that are doing that work, they will not have access to sort of the rest of their corporate environment, which is probably in a commercial tenant. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. So go ahead, Danny.
I just see some of the questions coming in. You were probably about to do the same thing, Steve. I'll toss over the first question. Best practices for securing VMs.
Is that a statement?
No, just not any best practices. This is just more of a question.
BitLocker.
Well, obviously, if you have VMs that you want to secure,
and I'm just going to drop the mic right there, BitLocker, and walk away.
I thought it was late for me.
Obviously, if you want to if these are VMs that you are actually wanting to keep under some type of greater security, and you are a government customer, obviously the best practice would be to put it in the most secure, clear cloud possible. I mean, you might also have guidelines that involve regulatory compliance, like FedRAMP. I get asked about FedRAMP a lot. What is FedRAMP?
Man, I knew you were going to ask that.
FedRAMP
is
more of a set of guidelines.
No, it's absolutely related. To give you the definition of FedRAMP, I would fail miserably, because think of it this way: it's a set of rules and regulations, right? FedRAMP is an accreditation, so you have to meet XYZ criteria, and then you become FedRAMP accredited or certified, whatever term you want to use. And we have an entire team, not just at Microsoft, but within Intune, that does nothing but compliance. And so those folks could tell you all the ins and outs of FedRAMP and some of the NIST rules, all the other stuff that's involved there. But essentially, for these government customers, they will say, look, if we want to consume your cloud service, at a minimum, it has to be FedRAMP certified. And so Azure and Office and all of us have to go out, and we go through that process. Some of these you only get one chance per year. I believe FedRAMP is one of those things. So you get one window a year to submit your service to be FedRAMP certified. And then assuming you meet all the criteria, which of course we do, you'll then get that FedRAMP certification. And there's different levels. There's FedRAMP moderate and FedRAMP high. Sorry, is that right? Anyway, there are different levels, and so depends on which accreditation you want to chase. But in Intune's case, both the commercial instance and our Gov instance are both FedRAMP high accredited. On the VM question, I was only halfway joking when I said BitLocker, but that's a part of it. To your point, Steve, where if you are a Gov customer, if you're a Gov customer and you work on Windows or iOS or Android, right, one of the very first things that these customers have to do is they apply what's called a STIG, right? So a STIG is another acronym, which is Secure Technical Implementation Guide. Again, for Windows, let's just use that since he's asking about VMs. It's a set of controls and settings, which in the past were GPO settings, which are now, most of them, almost knocking on my wood desk here pretty soon, almost all of them have been ported over to Intune settings. And so one of the things that I'm pushing internally as a feature request in Intune is to basically say in the console, just have a big easy red button that says apply the Windows 10 STIG. Because for most of these customers, a STIG is like putting your pants on in the morning, right? I mean, they just won't deploy, roll out anything. Windows 11 is a good example of this, right? Nobody's rolling out of Windows 11 in mass until DISA comes up and creates a STIG for that platform. Now DISA's got to keep up with these things, and as you can imagine, like when we were in these biannual releases where H1, H2 with Windows 10, DISA was like constantly trying to keep up with us, and we have a great relationship with them. Like we don't just rely on DISA to keep these things up. We have folks that work in that space that are colleagues of mine that make sure that the STIG is kept up to date and fresh. And these folks will say, okay, look, here are the new knobs in Windows that we think are going to be part of the STIG, and here's what we think the values should be. And so there's a whole effort behind the scenes that makes sure that those guides and recommendations are available every time we put out a new version of Windows. Ideally, we'd like that to be a 0-day kind of thing, but it just doesn't work that way. There's a few months lag typically. So a STIG is a very important part of securing Windows VMs or Windows machines for any government customer.
Excellent. So here's a question for Anton. Do you know any basic examples of customers that might be using multiple clouds?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And so yeah, there are actually some customers, some government entities who do use multiple clouds, and its primary reason is kind of having multiple units, one that is more of a commercial unit and one is more of a government unit. So there are some examples where it's not as convenient, obviously, as you have multiple disjoint tenants, but we have some customers who kind of are in this live in two worlds at the same time. And Pat is our greatest expert. I'm sure he can bring some more insights into this.
If Pat's our greatest expert, we're in big trouble. Let me just say that right off the bat.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
all fingers pointing at you.
Yeah.
Yes.
The multiple cloud thing is I mean, I could go on this for a while. It is a challenge. If you just kind of look at some of these, look at anybody in the DoD, right? The military entities, soldiers get moved around all the time, right? Danny would know. And so essentially, for instance, like if somebody gets assigned for 6 months to to a ship out, in the Mediterranean or somewhere, or to a base on the other side of the country or whatever, in some cases, these can be different tenants. And so it all just depends on how these folks have architected their MDM solutions. And so if that person who's going to be assigned 6 months somewhere else, they may need to still have access to the information from like the base or the location where they were, and then as well as needing access to email and documents to the place that they're going to. These are very valid scenarios today that we as Microsoft don't quite have really coherent solutions just yet. The identity piece of this is really big. So I know the Azure AD folks are working on sort of B2B kind of technologies where that scenario is a lot easier for for these customers to implement. But it's a real challenge, right? I mean, people moving around, going to different businesses, different orgs, mergers and acquisitions is another one, right? That's a huge one. Those happen all the time. And so when that company that you're purchasing may have a competing MDM, or they may have another Intune tenant. So like, okay, which tenant are we going to put folks in, and how are we going to do the migration? And what happens in the interim when I need access to data from both, right? So these are tough problems, the multi-cloud problem. And we're just now kind of getting to the point where, understanding these scenarios and then trying to figure out what we actually can do and build here.
Cool. Pat, we got a question from John. I was actually kind of wondering the same thing too. It's been a while. So when collaborating through our cloud services, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc., how do you know that the the person you're sharing with is GCC high or not, or will it be blocked? Like what's the policy when we're trying to collaborate on data?
How would you know whether they're GCC high or not? So the easy answer, and I'm all about easy answers. The easy answer is that, I mean, these clouds are isolated, right? And so there is no cross cloud collaboration. So in other words, Danny, if you're sitting in a public or a commercial tenant somewhere at company A and I'm in GCC high at company B, we're not going to be able to share data or anything like that. So if you're within that Gov Cloud boundary, then if you're within the same tenant, it's simple, right? You're just talking to one of your colleagues and working that way. If you're in a separate tenant, but you're within GCC high, those tenants are still isolated, right? Each tenant is like its own company, its own business. And so I'm not quite sure if I'm getting or answering the question the right way, but there is definitely isolation within these tenants, and it's part of the rules and regulations around the Gov Cloud that you cannot interact or talk with anything on sort of the public side or on the internet, essentially. So to give you an example, some of the feature parity gaps that we have are due to how we design these services. So I won't name names, but essentially, if you build a service on the commercial side that relies on a service that does X, Y, Z, well, that service then needs to be an instance of that in the Gov Cloud, in that bubble, if you will, and that's not an easy thing to do, right? And so that cross cloud collaboration thing is kind of blocked by default, sort of the nature of having an isolated cloud. But at the same time, right, for certain features and how they're architected, that's where things break down, right? And so the solution tends to be, well, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and re-architect this, or like I said, have these other teams, rebuild their service instance within the Gov Cloud so that you can get feature XYZ for Gov customers. So long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but hopefully I got to the gist of the question.
I think you got it.
So Venkata, I have a question for you. I work a lot with state and local government customers, and they, let's say one of my customers watched the fantastic episode that Danny and I had a couple of weeks back on revisiting the big three with cloud attach, co-management, tenant attach, cloud management gateway. And they're currently using Config Manager, and they have an tenant that in a Microsoft 365 GCC tenant. Would they still be able to take advantage of some of these cloud attached features with their Config Manager configuration?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of I think Pat covered some of this, right? So the government clouds are one of the reasons we started to architect our features in a more configurable way, because the endpoints are different from a sovereign perspective, right? But the same features should apply, and the same value add that we build for cloud attach, co-management, autopilot should work seamlessly in common clouds too. And any feature we build, we kind of historically roll that way through, right? We kind of make sure that it works smoothly, and we started to turn, by the time we GA, we just turn the knobs. And at the end of the day, the architecture should look the same, the value should look the same. It's just that since cloud services exist in its own boundaries, everything is configured in such a way to work seamlessly.
And also to add to what Venkata mentioned, we're still working to make sure there is feature parity for the cloud attached features, but you could already set up a connector go through the cloud attached wizard in the config manager, and you'll get you'll at least get the unified device experience, and you'll be able to operate on perform some actions on the devices. So while there's still some discrepancy in feature parity, the main functionality is already there.
It's always designed to unify or catch up, right? Sorry, Danny, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I think I'm set.
All right, well, so that brings me to my question that I know, Pat, you get all the time, and I know when the rare times I deal with DoD, we get those questions too. But like feature lag, features in GA, but it takes X amount of time. So can you characterize a little bit of that process? I mean, you don't have to go super deep, but just give a summary of how that process happens and going from GA, getting the features into the gov tenants.
Yeah. So that's kind of the bane of my existence. There are feature gaps between Gov and commercial. If you do a quick Bing search for just search Intune Gov, the top link that comes up is it's called the Intune Government Service Description. So it's a doc that I maintain that highlights the Intune feature gaps between Gov and commercial. Now, we're not the only one. Colleagues over in Office, in Teams, in the compliance team, and Azure AD, they all have parity gaps, right? From an Intune side, what's the process? Ideally, when we GA something in the commercial side, the goal is to have it rolled out to Gov within 30 days. So as we roll out to all of our what we call scale units, so basically all the the servers and hardware around the world, the Gov Cloud is the last in that process. That's why there's that 30-day sort of window. Now, what we're finding is that as we design and build feature XYZ in the commercial side, there are dependencies for that feature that don't exist in Gov, right? There's lots of examples of that. You'll see if you go to that doc that I mentioned, you'll see that there's some of them highlighted. We don't give the reasons why there's parity gaps there, but primarily, again, the Gov Cloud is an isolated instance of Intune. It's an isolated instance of Azure AD, Office, Azure, etc., right? And so it cannot, those services cannot interact or communicate with any other services that are available out on the internet. So basically, in some cases, you got to build it twice, right? And when we do these things, there's a tricky dance that we have to do with customers because I think I mentioned before, with the government SKUs, they are priced slightly higher than commercial SKUs. So government customers are paying more and maybe not necessarily getting everything that's available in the commercial side. So our leadership team, myself, all the colleagues I work with out in the field, we continue to sort of push on the internal engineering teams to say, look, we cannot forget about Gov customers. We need to be thinking about them at design time and not afterwards after we ship something to say, okay, great. Now, how do we wedge this into Gov Cloud, right? That's not good software architecting practice, right? So in some cases, it's easy. In some cases, it's much more challenging where, in some cases, there's features where we literally had to go back to the drawing board and re-architect it kind of from the ground up. And some of those are happening right now as we speak. But it's always going to be a challenge, not just for Intune, but for everybody. And it's just because, like I said, it's an isolated instance with its own set of rules and regulations. Always going to be tricky.
Yeah.
It's a great question, though.
It's a question that
well,
I know
there's regularly an audit.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to chime in, Pat. There's a regulatory and audit and compliance value add with that premium charge. The cost that would normally be endured of having auditors come in and certify everything for, let's say, in the past for on-prem stuff, we're giving customers assurance and guarantees that we've passed the audits, we've gone through and got all the necessary regulatory compliance, correct?
Oh, dude, you hit it right on the head.
SKUs?
Yeah, that is precisely why you pay a premium for that. And I mean, you even highlighted the example there. So maybe you should finish this out, and I'll just go back to bed. But yeah, for the customers that are buying that, we are giving them those assurances. We are giving them those assurances that we can pass a FedRAMP High audit, that we can pass a audit for whatever other accreditations are out there. Because the other option is that the government goes and builds this themselves. Or they go to AWS or a competitor. Fortunately, we're kind of ahead of some of our competitors in this space, right? Where We've got an Office suite that has been blessed by and accredited by all these things, and so but the reason why that there is a premium is exactly what you highlighted, is that customers can sleep well at night by paying a few extra dollars to ensure that Microsoft has gone through the ringer on these things, and that if an auditor comes in, they're going to skate by, and basically that whole auditing thing is on us. It's not on the customer. Right. So the customer just says, all right, Microsoft, we take you at your word that you're accredited. Here's our money. And it's basically on us to keep that up, right, and maintain it, or address additional accreditation requirements that may come up. So there's some that we're dealing with right now. Actually, I can't really delve into that, but yeah, it's a never-ending cycle.
That you had, of course, the document that you maintain on the Intune government cloud, the Intune government service instance, and we've had a question come in about we've had some questions come in about other Microsoft 365 products like Compliance Manager, and whether that's available in GCC or GCC High. And I guess the short answer is, from a SKU perspective, G3, G5, product-wise, we're on parity. But there, as you said earlier, there may be some feature gaps for some of the various Microsoft 365 products. Don't we maintain that roadmap somewhere on the doc side? I think we do.
Yeah, we do. And actually, I have to give kudos to those teams because they do a much better job than that silly little crappy document that I maintain. There is I just literally looked at it on Wednesday, and I can't remember the URL, but if you just search for, I think it's Microsoft 365 roadmap, basically it's a set of drop-down boxes where you can say teams, pick the cloud area, in development, or what's new. So you can filter put a bunch of filters on it, and it will show you exactly what features and capabilities product have been released in GovClouds or are in development for GovClouds. Intune does have some information in there. I don't know who from Intune put that in. This is kind of on my list, but it's lower priority. Is that we should be integrating there, right? Because that's a really great system in terms of keeping it up to date and being able to very easily see what's coming into Gov rather than like the static document that I maintain. So yeah, there's definitely a great site out there. Excuse me. Like I said, you can pick like, I think there's 30 services that you can go choose from. So it's pretty comprehensive. And then, like I said, put the other filters on there for GovCloud and so forth, and you'll get exactly. In fact, it even has rough time frames and things like that. That looks about right. That URL on the bottom of the screen. So yeah, kudos to those folks. They did a great job on that, and we need to go integrate better with that. This is so formal. When are we going to start talking about baseball and the Seahawks season? And
I would.
I want to get in a football conversation with Danny, and I know he's.
You don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want this. You don't want this.
I don't want to go all Chris Farley on you, but remember that time you were a baseball player?
That was cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah, Danny, we're a 4-win team, and I don't even know where we're going to get 4 wins this year. So yeah, I didn't play a lot of football growing up, but my understanding is you have to have a quarterback. And, so
all I know is
I read that on the internet somewhere. So
all I know is the Mariners have been sweeping the Rangers and just taking them to school.
Didn't that just happen yesterday afternoon? As a matter of fact,
Burns.
Yeah. Well, okay. Look, so yeah, I didn't grab a Mariner shirt this morning. I love my friend Steve here, and wasn't going to do that to him. But yeah, we're on our way to Houston and then to New York to play the Yankees. That's got 0-8 written all over it. So yeah, and Houston was here this weekend and swept us, right? And I was at the Saturday game. So yeah. Anyway.
So we knew this was going to probably come, but we have an autopilot question.
Oh God.
Question.
Danny.
I have a customer that is looking to block Windows personal devices within GCC High. Since this environment still does not have Autopilot available and all their Windows devices are AAD joined, it's not as simple as blocking it through device enrollment restrictions. Wondering if anyone has come across this and found any type of solution.
So I'm gonna defer me answering it because I've answered enough shows, and I'm gonna go give it to that guy to my left. At least I hope. Venkata, go ahead, jump in.
Right there. Yeah.
that way, I think.
We got a whole Brady Bunch window thing going on here, so you got to find out where Bobby and Greg are.
I
And,
was
yeah.
trying to figure out like left
Da-da-da,
him or
da-da-da.
left to his hotel room, right? Like it's like anyway. No, yeah. Unfortunately, there isn't much, right? Because today when we restrict everything, including AEDJ, unless you are a pre-registered Autopilot. So until we have that functionality, there isn't a good way to do so. We do have filters though, where you can restrict filters based on a particular SKU, so you can restrict home SKU, but that's about it until we add additional filters like join type, workplace join, or ADJ. And currently, there is no elegant solution to do so. I'm sorry, but that's the reality for now.
Yeah, I think related to that, it's also and Venkata's right. Unfortunately, we really don't have much of a solution. But the way that Intune tags devices when they get enrolled, they're either tagged as personal or corporate. And so when you come in through Autopilot, that device, Intune will tag that device as a corporate device. Therefore, it makes it very easy to put in an enrollment restriction to say, okay, well, now block personal windows, meaning that block any Windows machine that's not coming in through Autopilot, right? And so we have documentation out there too that explains how Intune tags devices as corporate versus personal. So I think it's important for customers to also understand that because it does affect potentially how you can do dynamic grouping or how you can, block personal devices and so forth. But unfortunately in Gov, we kind of have our hands tied at the moment on this one.
Yeah, but good feedback. Good ask. It helps
Absolutely.
us practice
Yeah.
some of the us. So thanks.
Here's a question for the Config Manager guys from Timothy. Can you clarify if you need another instance of Config Manager to use with GCC High? I thought we could not use Config Man with the commercial tenant and GCC High tenant at the same time.
I can take this one. So it really depends on the functionality. We have the functionality around cloud management and discovery, and that functionality supports onboarding multiple instances. So you can technically onboard one instance for the government cloud and one instance for the commercial cloud. Now, when it relates to cloud attach, we only support a single tenant. So for cloud attach, you can pick one, but it would actually be very interesting to hear from you on the what scenarios you'd like to see for example, the cloud attach functionality, work from the same config manager environment in both clouds. So yeah, please submit feedback if you can. It'll be very interesting to hear. But yeah, at the moment, the cloud management you can do multiple, but the cloud attach you could do just one.
Speaking of related to that on the cloud attach thing, is when you go do that or when you go build the CMG, right, you have to select which cloud. So you can select public cloud or gov cloud. I got feedback recently from a customer that they needed additional authentication options there. So if you're a smart card only user or a CAC user is what they call them in the DoD, we're kind of limited, right? We only do sort of a username and password auth when you basically do that setup. So I've filed that, and not sure how viable or how easily we would be able to build that. But I thought it was pretty interesting feedback around being a Gov customer, because identities and Gov are a totally different ballgame in general.
So I see there's a question related to third-party application patching via Winget. Is it coming to GCC with Intune and MIM? I don't have an answer for that one, really. Pat, I don't even know if Winget is in there. So do you know, Pat? Do you know?
Well, yeah. Let me ask the rules about what are we allowed to say about future plans?
Let's stay away from the future plan, especially in Gov area.
All right, so you guys are spoiling all the fun here, man.
Well, it's actually a good.
Well,
I don't want it to leave and break us into jail, but like Venkata, correct me if I'm wrong. It's part of the operating system now, Winget, but Winget does make calls to different services that may or may not exist in DoD. So therefore, I don't know about its complete functionality. Venkata, Anton, chime in. We were kind of talking about some of this today.
I think it's something we'll need to follow.
Hypothetically, I would imagine that. No.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Steve.
I would imagine at some point there would have to be a solution revolving around the type of repositories and how they're actually ring-fenced. But again, I don't think there's anything that we can disclose at this time. I don't know. I'll defer to you guys.
You hit it on the head, Steve. We can't really disclose, as you guys just said. So the Store for Business is being sunset. Now, Store for Business never existed in GovCloud. One of the big challenges Gov customers have is managing Windows apps in GovCloud in general, right? So if you look at iOS and Android, right, they've got stores and you go get the app. It's super simple on iOS and Android, whereas in Windows, in GovCloud, the way you have to manage Windows apps is that you go grab them from the public store and you download what's called an offline license. And then basically you take that package, upload it into Intune, and then you manage it like it's a line of business app, right? Which is challenging, right? Let's say you have 20 Windows apps that you're pushing out. And if so they're not talking to a store to get auto updates and all that good stuff like we have in iOS and Android. So basically somebody's got to say, okay, well, a new version of, Notepad is out. I need to go grab that, take away the old package, upload the new package, and then assign the app and do it that way. So managing apps in GovCloud, Windows apps, I should say, in GovCloud, that's been the challenge all along. We are solving that problem in the future. Winget and repositories, potentially will be part of that solution. Just as we kind of want to standardize on those things, and Winget being part of the OS is a great thing too. So the problem is a big one, well known. Really, we've got tons of feedback on it, so it's being addressed. That's about all we can say, I guess.
But related to Store for Business and Education, we are publishing a blog post later today, so stay tuned. Watching Tech Community and our marketing stuff for the blog post about the Windows Update for Business information.
Oh, awesome.
You heard it here first.
What else? So Pat, what are some other good FYI things? I know me and you've gone a few places, or I got to tag along with you for a few places, but what are some top things when you're talking to GovSec, the most interesting things that come top of mind that pretty much everybody asks?
Whew, that's a good one.
Top three. What are the top three? I'm sure you get them all the time.
Yeah. Well, parity is always part of the conversation, right? It'll never go away. Some people are more, let's just say, vocal about it than others. So it's when you don't have parity, like the example just came up. The person asked a question about blocking personal devices, right? So we don't have Autopilot in GovCloud, right? So a lot of what I do is trying to figure out workarounds for these things, right? Unfortunately, for that particular scenario, we don't have a workaround. But there's another endpoint analytics we don't have in GovCloud today. So what is a workaround, to that? So to give you an example, I got a customer that's using ConfigMan, they're co-managed, and so they're basically using the ConfigMan collection data and the hardware information to check for Windows 11 readiness, right? So endpoint analytics would just do that for you automatically, spit you out a nice, pretty report. But the workaround to that, right? So they're using ConfigMan to get that information, right? It's not, it's not as pretty and elegant, but it works, right? So that's a big piece of what I do is I call myself the Gov MacGyver, right? Is trying to figure out, what we can make work or what we can duct tape together, and just to kind of get it working in Gov. And then there's scenarios. I made the comment earlier about identity in Gov is a unique thing, and it very much is, right? And for those that aren't aware, like for instance, all of the DoD, all 4+ million employees, whatever, none of them have a username and password, right? All of them have a smart card, right? Or hey, look, there's Pat's badge. And so it's called a CAC, a common access card. And they use it similar like we use our badges, right? To get into doors and buildings, and I can go buy lunch in the cafeteria and all that. But that's their identity, right? And so we've had to build things in Intune, like there's something called derived credentials, which essentially allows those folks to take the certificates that are on that card and then get them onto their mobile device. And I won't walk you through that process or anything and bore everybody to tears, but they have unique challenges with identity. So when you go to just to go enroll a new iOS or Android device, you have to go in, you have to follow the login from another device path, right? Because they'll get, you see the box that says type in your username. Well, okay, I'm pfetty@microsoft.com. They don't have that. There's no UPN there. So they say log in from another device, which means that they go over to a Windows PC, they put in their CAC card, they type in the PIN, so they unlock that, and then they're given a code on the mobile device. So they take that code, open up a browser, go to microsoft.com/device login, type in that code, and on the back end, the service Azure AD authenticates them and continues them on the device enrollment. So that's just one simple example of how identity is a unique challenge to Gov customers. There's other scenarios about bulk Windows enrollment for CAC users and just other things that the identity challenges are very real there. Things like implementing temporary access passwords or even continuous access evaluation, CAE, much different in terms of how they're used and implemented in Gov. So they have unique identity challenges as well. Yeah. Is that 3? I didn't count them. Did I give you 3? You said top 3.
That was solid. Yeah, that was solid.
Right.
That was solid. And I was hoping the CAC card would come up because I've heard that one more than enough times myself. Any good learnings from commercial that, or let's say, let me say it this way: any good learnings from commercial that could go into Gov, or any good learnings from Gov that we should be talking about commercial?
Yeah, another good question. So I'm glad I asked it. I've been waiting all morning to use that line. You guys told me this was going to be much more informal, right? So I'm here punch drunk, having to get up at 7 o'clock.
It is informal. Look, you got that ugly 12 in the background, dude.
Hey, that's my wife's desk. I'm not going to touch anything over there. I was told to turn off her monitor.
Oh yeah. You definitely
it was showing the Seahawks logo there. So yeah.
We're hotels here. I mean,
all right. Now I forgot the question I asked myself. Learnings. Well, the big one I already covered, and it just it needs to be hammered home really internally. Is that we need to be architecting and building solutions with Gov in mind and not as an afterthought. I will kind of admit, I mean, that's sort of been how things have worked in the past, right? I mean, when our previous vice president was here, Brad, you guys know him. He told us at one point that, I don't know if it was EMS or Intune, but one of the two are the fastest growing business in the history of Microsoft, right? So when you're going that fast and basically growing exponentially every year, and you're trying to you're the new kid on the block in terms of MDM, and you're trying to build stuff that's on par with all of our competitors, right? You're just constantly on that treadmill, and that's why you sort of get into that. Okay, let's go solve the problem for commercial, and we'll figure out Gov later, right? Well, we're well beyond that now, and so we're still growing, which is great news. But that mindset, that thinking has to be changed to say, look, once again, these customers are paying a premium. The government is Microsoft's largest customer. It has been, for the 25 plus years I've been here, and so we need to treat them as such, right? And so that's probably one of the biggest learnings I've got was that it just from a day one when you're whiteboarding, kind of thing in your office, you need to have these sovereign clouds in mind when you go architect these solutions, because trying to wedge them in later is either going to fail or be twice as expensive, which is even worse.
Steve,
We did get a question about getting OneDrive to automatically sign in. I assume this is a government tenant. Even though existing creds for other apps are working, Office, Teams, Edge, I would basically tell them to ensure that the Windows identity is the same identity they're using for OneDrive Sync. If it's not the case, or if they're still running into problems, as always, to open up a support case.
I'm not aware of any current issues with OneDrive and Auth in Gov. So
we have special support programs for our government customers as well.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I am dealing with a kind of issue like that now, but you're right, Steve. So in fact, it's important for customers to know at least that. So anytime one of my customers, so my role, I didn't really explain it at the beginning, but Danny and Steve know, and for the others, I'm in what's called the customer acceleration team. So we work with large enterprise customers. There's about 80 of us around the globe. It just turns out I'm our sole dedicated government person. So I only work with government customers, but the goal is to get them onto the Intune service, keep them happy, keep building a better mousetrap. But when they do run into issues, we ask them to open up a support ticket from their console. We have code on the back end that will detect when a new support case comes from a GCC high tenant, and that gets routed to the proper support personnel that have been cleared to work with U.S. national or government customers. So there is a special process for government customers, and so they don't get just kicked into the regular support queue. They get routed to the right personnel, and they are depending on, of course, if it's Sub B, Sub A, whatever. But they do get sort of bumped at the top of the list to a specific team that is built to handle these things.
Yeah, I was Pat's teammate for a little while, and I knew him as the Fed guy. And then when I moved into my current role, Pat is now more of a lifeline. Pat's importance to me went up way high, as all my customers are government.
Yeah, but Pat's still an idiot, so you may want to get a better lifeline.
I don't know. So there was a question from Twitter about, is Windows 365 available in GCC? Not yet, but last week Satya announced it at Inspire, so it's coming in the next few months.
Anton, Steve,
I can't define
Anton, Venkata, any scenarios that you guys are seeking feedback on from the engineering plans for government customers, like anything y'all interested in hearing that we need to go do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, go ahead, Venkata.
No, I was going to say anything around enrollment, Autopilot would be good, or including cloud attach. So the question that came up was great, right? So we know what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I would say any requirements around multi-tenancy or multiple clouds would be very interesting to learn about the scenarios, as we've heard even today a couple of questions around that. So yeah.
I just want to call out, I keep seeing the feedback link pop up. Say, please use that feedback link. It's super important. If you do have feedback, make sure it gets sent up so that we can entertain and understand the asks that are coming. The community and our customers are large and vast all over the world. So that's the unified path where you can drop feedback, comments, concerns, thoughts, so we can actually listen and take action and plan, strategize around.
Can I use that link too? Because I've got lots of feedback, lots
Absolutely
of comments. All right.
Absolutely not.
I'm going to block off the rest of my morning because I got a lot of stuff to get off my chest.
Well, Pat, the thing about you're internal with us. Like, I actually have blocked you from email. Oh, wait, I'm not on mute. I'm sorry.
I got a Danny Guillory filter too, man. So it's all good. Yeah. Steve's just goes right to junk mail. And so I'll look once a month and just see if Steve's reached out. That's been great. It's good to talk to you guys. I haven't talked to you guys in a while, so.
Yep, it's been a while. Steve, we
Better
got
if we
one
didn't
more.
have to do it
So we
early
got
in
one
the
more.
morning.
We got time for one more question.
Is this the baseball question now? I guess not.
All right, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think we lost Steve.
I think we lost Steve. Oh.
Yeah, we lost him.
Yep.
All right, well, I'll kick out the last question and we'll let that one take us out. From Nathan, I'd like to learn more about supporting CAT cards on Intune Manage plus Azure AD join PCs. Any resources you can share and point to, anything like that?
That's a good question. I don't think we have any documentation specifically around CAC cards or smart cards in general, which is basically what a CAC is. I've never seen anything. I don't want to say this is just like internal tribal knowledge kind of stuff, but I've not seen anything publicly available. I don't know if there's opportunities for these folks to reach out to us or over email and ask questions or whatever. But if there are specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them over email. But I don't think we have any kind of public documentation that really talks specifically about that area. Now, I mean, there is documentation about like, okay, how does the login from another device path work and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily tie in back into the CAC or the smart card. So nothing CAC specific, just because, I mean, CAC is DoD only. So it's just one small, well, it's not a small customer, but one small section of our customer base.
I'm sure it sounds like a ask that we need to eventually look at trying to get that, even though it may be for a small niche of customers, but still seems important.
Yeah, there's some gov related documentation work that we need to do. I get asked about FIPS compliance, FIPS 140-2 all the time. And so we need to clearly document what our story is. Right now, our story is not an easy answer. We are working towards just, yes, we're compliant, it being the answer, but that's going to take some additional work. And so, yeah, that's another good example where just dealing with smart card auth in general. Now this would come from the Azure AD team, of course, not Intune. But yeah, that's fantastic feedback. And I kind of like having specific information about that, because smart cards aren't just a DoD thing, right? Oil and gas companies use them a lot. Some financial institutions use smart cards as well. So yeah, there's definitely a need for it.
All right, so we are getting.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, no, time passed like fast, especially when you got good group and good chemistry. I wake up eventually, 15 minutes into the show.
You should have been drinking all that cough syrup before the show.
I don't know. Now, hey, I appreciate all you guys being here. Last thoughts, Pat, Anton, Venkata. Last thoughts.
The one more thing to mention about the feedback is if just to add, if you have any feedback on for cloud listeners specifically, what's missing, what you need, first let us know as well to help us prioritize.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I'll oh, sorry, go ahead, Venkata.
No, I was saying like all the scenarios we talked about, like even a couple of questions that came up, it kind of helps us prioritize and think through, what we got to fix it. So please use the feedback links and keep the feedback coming.
Well, that was my point. I was going to say the same thing, but keep giving us feedback, right? I don't want to beat it over the head, but that feedback doesn't just go into a black hole, right? We have a team of folks on the back end that process that, and we have a CRM system where we track these things. So it doesn't go unnoticed or unseen. There is, like I said, a team of folks that deal specifically just with that for our public channels. So keep using that feedback URL.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining. Everybody have a good day.
All right, folks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.